Antarctica is not a place where mistakes are forgiven. It is a continent of silence, ice, and relentless precision. Temperatures fall low enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes. Winds travel unhindered across thousands of kilometers of empty white land. Food is scarce, distances are vast, and survival depends not on strength or intelligence, but on discipline. Here, life exists only because it follows rules. Among the creatures that have adapted to this extreme world, few are as iconic as the penguin. To human eyes, penguins appear clumsy, almost comical, waddling across the ice in awkward lines. But in Antarctica, appearances deceive. Penguins are not survivors by chance. They are survivors by structure. They move together. They hunt together. They breed together. They endure together. And in this frozen ecosystem, leaving the group is not an act of independence. It is a death sentence. Yet, in the early 21st century, a camera captured something that seemed to break this rule. One penguin walked away. Antarctica, a world without mercy. To understand why this moment shocked scientists, we must first understand the environment in which it occurred. Antarctica is the coldest, driest, and windiest continent on Earth. Unlike the Arctic, which is an ocean surrounded by land, Antarctica is land surrounded by ocean, an enormous ice-covered mass isolated from the rest of the world. Life here exists on a thin margin. There are no trees, no permanent human settlements, no agriculture. The food chain is brutally simple. Phytoplankton feed krill, krill feed fish, fish feed seals and penguins feed larger predators. Every movement matters. Every calorie counts. For animals living in Antarctica, efficiency is survival. This is especially true for the Adélie penguin. The Adélie penguin, discipline made flesh. The Adélie penguin, Pygoscelis adélii, is one of the most studied penguin species in the world. First described in the 19th century during French Antarctic expeditions, it has become a symbol of polar resilience. Adélie penguins are small, measuring around 70 centimeters tall, but what they lack in size they compensate for in endurance. They can survive temperatures below minus 40 degrees Celsius, travel dozens of kilometers across ice to reach feeding grounds, and dive repeatedly into freezing water in search of fish and krill. But their greatest survival tool is not physical. It is social structure. Adélie penguins live in massive colonies, sometimes numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Within these colonies, behavior is highly synchronized. Movements are predictable. Paths are reused. Timing is shared. When penguins march from their nesting grounds to the sea, they do so along established routes. These paths are not random. They minimize exposure to wind, reduce energy loss, and ensure that individuals do not become isolated. In Antarctica, isolation kills. A single penguin, alone on the ice, faces impossible odds. Greater heat loss, higher risk of predation, disorientation in a landscape without landmarks, exhaustion before reaching food. For this reason, penguins almost never leave the group voluntarily. Almost. The rule that was broken. In 2007, acclaimed filmmaker Werner Herzog released a documentary titled Encounters at the End of the World. The film was not about penguins specifically. It was an exploration of Antarctica itself, its scientists, its workers, its silence, and its strange beauty. During filming, Herzog and his crew captured a moment that would later become one of the most discussed animal behaviors on the internet. In a wide, desolate Antarctic landscape, a group of Adélie penguins can be seen marching toward the ocean. Their destination is clear. The sea means food. The sea means survival. But one penguin stops. Then, slowly, deliberately, it turns away. Instead of following the group toward the coast, it begins walking inland toward the mountains. This direction leads not to food, but to the interior of Antarctica, a place of higher elevation, colder temperatures, and no access to the ocean. The camera follows the penguin as it walks alone, its black and white figure growing smaller against the endless ice. A scientist nearby remarks, almost casually, that penguins who do this are sometimes observed. They just walk off, he says, and they keep walking. Why this moment matters. To an untrained eye, the scene may seem unremarkable. Animals behave strangely all the time. But to biologists familiar with penguin behavior, this moment raised immediate red flags. This was not exploration. This was not curiosity. This was maladaptive behavior. The penguin was not injured. It was not being chased. There was no visible threat behind it. There was no apparent reason to abandon the group. And yet it did. From a scientific perspective, this kind of behavior is extremely rare. Penguins are not solitary animals. They do not wander. They do not improvise. Their survival strategy depends on doing the same thing at the same time as everyone else. Deviation is not rewarded. Deviation is punished by nature. At the time, researchers proposed several hypotheses, none of them fully satisfying. One possibility was neurological disorientation. Extreme cold, stress, or illness could impair a penguin's internal navigation systems, causing it to misinterpret direction. Another theory involved sensory overload. In large colonies, constant noise, movement, and aggression can create stress conditions. A penguin under extreme stress might exhibit abnormal behavior, including withdrawal. There is also the possibility of genetic or developmental anomalies, subtle differences in brain structure or sensory processing that lead to unpredictable actions. But here is the crucial point. None of these explanations suggest intention. From a scientific standpoint, the penguin was not choosing anything in a human sense. It was responding to internal signals that researchers do not fully understand. And yet, when the clip resurfaced years later on social media, intention was exactly what people saw. When the footage reappeared online, it was no longer presented as a neutral scientific observation. It was framed as a story. Captions spoke of rebellion, of existential despair, of a penguin rejecting society or walking toward death. The animal was given a name, the nihilist penguin. Viewers projected human emotions onto the scene. Loneliness, depression, defiance, freedom. The penguin became a mirror. But before we explore how and why that happened, we must pause here at the original moment, stripped of symbolism. A single animal, in one of the harshest environments on Earth, walked away from the only system that guaranteed its survival. Science does not yet fully understand why. And that uncertainty is where the story truly begins. When the footage of the lone Adélie penguin resurfaced online, something remarkable happened. The scene itself had not changed. The ice was the same. The silence was the same. The penguin was the same. But the world watching it was no longer the same. What had once been a brief observational moment in a documentary became, years later, a cultural symbol, endlessly shared, captioned, analyzed, and reinterpreted. Not as animal behavior, but as a story about choice, despair, and freedom. To understand how this happened, we must step away from Antarctica and examine something far closer to home. The human mind. Do animals choose? At the center of the debate lies a deceptively simple question. Can animals make conscious choices in the way humans do? In biology, this question has been asked for centuries. And the answer, while complex, is largely consistent across modern science. Animals act based on instinct, learned behavior, and physiological states. Even highly intelligent species, dolphins, elephants, primates, operate within cognitive frameworks fundamentally different from human self-awareness. They do not contemplate meaning. They do not reflect on existence. They do not rebel against society. They respond. This does not make animal behavior simple or predictable. On the contrary, it can be extraordinarily complex. But complexity is not the same as intention. When a penguin deviates from its colony, scientists do not ask why it wanted to. They ask, was it disoriented? Was it ill? Was it stressed? Was there a neurological impairment? In other words, what internal or external factor disrupted a normally rigid behavioral pattern? The idea that the penguin decided to walk away from life itself is not supported by evidence. It is a narrative imposed after the fact. And this brings us to the heart of the matter. Why humans see meaning where none exists. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. From an evolutionary standpoint, this trait kept us alive. Recognizing patterns allowed early humans to predict danger, locate food, and interpret social cues. Over time, this survival mechanism evolved into something more abstract. We began to search for meaning. We assign stories to events. We personify nature. We project emotions onto animals. This tendency is known as anthropomorphism, the attribution of human traits, emotions, or intentions to non-human entities. Anthropomorphism is not a flaw. It is a cognitive shortcut. It allows us to relate to a world that would otherwise feel indifferent and hostile. But it has limits. When we watch a penguin walking alone into an empty white landscape, we do not see a neurological anomaly. We see ourselves. The birth of the nihilist penguin. The term nihilist penguin did not originate from science. It emerged from internet culture, a space where irony, humor, and existential anxiety often overlap. Online, the penguin was reframed as a symbol of rejection of societal norms, existential resignation, quiet rebellion against predetermined paths. Captions appeared. He realized nothing mattered. He chose freedom over survival. He walked away from expectations. These interpretations resonated, not because they were accurate, but because they were familiar. In a world marked by economic pressure, social comparison, and constant connectivity, many people recognized the feeling of wanting to step away. The penguin became a metaphor, not for animal behavior, but for human fatigue. The danger of romanticizing nature. There is a subtle but important risk in this kind of reinterpretation. When we romanticize animal behavior, we distort reality. Nature is not poetic. It is not moral. It does not reward courage or punish conformity. Nature is indifferent. The penguin walking inland was not embracing freedom. It was almost certainly moving toward death. By framing this act as meaningful, we risk misunderstanding both animals and ourselves. We replace uncomfortable truths with comforting narratives. This is not new. For centuries, humans have projected values onto animals. The lion as courage, the owl as wisdom, the wolf as rebellion. These symbols tell us far more about human psychology than about the animals themselves. The penguin is no exception. What the science actually tells us. From a scientific perspective, the most honest answer to the mystery of the lone penguin is also the least satisfying. We do not fully know, and that uncertainty matters. It reminds us that even in a world mapped by satellites and studied by specialists, nature still resists complete explanation. Not every behavior fits neatly into our models. But crucially, uncertainty does not imply meaning. It implies limits. Limits of observation. Limits of interpretation. Limits of human understanding. Science does not rush to fill these gaps with stories. It leaves them open. Why this story spread now? The timing of the penguin's resurgence is not accidental. In periods of social uncertainty, people gravitate towards symbols that express what they struggle to articulate. The image of a lone figure walking away from the crowd is powerful precisely because it is ambiguous. It allows each viewer to project their own narrative. Burnout becomes rebellion. Confusion becomes clarity. Withdrawal becomes strength. The penguin did not change. We did. The penguin as a mirror. In the end, the story of the penguin is not about Antarctica. It is about us. Our need to believe that stepping away has meaning. Our fear that following the group is a loss of self. Our desire to see intention where there may only be malfunction. The penguin does not ask these questions. We do. And perhaps that is the most important lesson this story offers. Not a message about freedom or despair, but a reminder of how easily we project our inner worlds onto a silent, indifferent universe. Final reflection. The lone penguin walked away from the colony. Science observes the behavior. The internet writes the story. And somewhere between the two, meaning is invented, not by the penguin, but by us.